back. This is Schauer Thoughts with Sarah Schauer, a podcast for left and right brainers. This is part 2 to our Decentering gender series. There may be 3 parts because I did more research, and you know when you uncover some stuff and you're like, there's simply more to talk about. Anywho, it is July 1st. Pride is over. I'm no longer gay. My husband and I are in a loveless marriage with our 2 beautiful children, from a previous marriage. Anyway, now, how have I been before we get this shower thought started? Well, I've been horribly depressed. But here's the thing. I think I'm on the up. I'm not sure. I think I'm like, when you're 75% way through a depressive episode, it's just kind of the world around me and then some things that are like, when like the progress loading bar, but it's like kind of frozen at some like spot and you're like, Jesus. And the more you watch it, the more it like slows down. There actually is a term for that. And it's similar to like when you watch a clock and the second doesn't change. Oh, it's going to kill me that I don't know it. Anywho, so that's getting a little bit better. I am, starting to, I guess, romantically dip my toes in the water. I have a date on Thursday. Watch this episode, go out. And that date was the most horrifying experience of my life. And so now I'm going to be, no. The person is incredibly, nice and fine. I just, life has been life. And I know Queer Ultimatum is on. Anyone here watching Queer Ultimatum Season 2? Rebecca?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I watched the first half of the first episode and then I started to cringe when the blonde girl was like, everyone is so sexy. Everyone is so hot. I can't wait to start, dating. And I'm like, you're here to fix your relationship, not date people. Anywho, but I mean, she, whatever issues come up. I have watched the promos with Megan and Megan's partner. Megan's partner cheats on her with someone else, and then it all gets messy. A shared Spotify playlist. That's just a nightmare. The thing is Queer Ultimatum is insightful in some ways, but also it's kind of interesting because marriage is a construct. It's I understand that there are, cultural significances to ritual and legal benefits to marriage. So I'm not obtuse, but I'm saying we're all sapphics in this group. Surely we understand that, we're kind of doing stuff out of the box at this point. I don't know why you'd want to re-enter the box. Now I understand that the, checking boxes can get you access to someone's hospital room. So that is, you would need to reconfine in that way. So yes, but it's just an interesting show. And there's Joanna Garcia Swisher. Now, she seems like a really nice lady, and I've talked about this before on a previous podcast, but a straight female host, love her. I love her, but she's just kind of there, I feel like. Oh, Joanna, I've made 4 sketches now on TikTok about Queer Ultimatum. I should really watch it, but when you're just depressed, and then you see people in a chaotic relationship, and it makes it, I guess actually that probably would make, no, comparison is the thief of joy. Also, comparison shouldn't inspire joy in a similar vein. So I don't want to get joy out of watching other people's relationships crumble. However, Megan from Queer Ultimatum 2, if you are single, what's up? I'll follow you on TikTok. Also, guys, please don't tag. Please, this is just a gay yearning from a distance. Anywho, this is Shower Thoughts. We're going to talk about decentering gender. I think we left off with things that were unnecessarily gendered, and that's everyday objects, which is the concrete, the visual. Now, gender is a construct, like I said. It's an idea, it's a thought, and it's more of, at this point, a self-fulfilling prophecy. The thing is gender is socially prescribed, which means it's it's foretold. You're told beforehand, hey, this is how your life is going to be and how it's going to end, right? And you're like, okay, so the thing is you can decenter gender, but also you can abide by the constraints of gender. We're going to get in how the brain indexes abstract thought. This article is called Faith, Truth, and Forgiveness, How Your Brain Processes Abstract Thought. Now, I will be taking the absolute longest route because that's the Sarah Schauer way. Life is about the journey, not the destination. And when you road trip with me, we are seeing all the sights. We are stopping in every single state, every capital, every big rock in Montana. We are taking a gander. If I'm being forced to drive, I want to look at everything. Okay, so we're going to talk about faith, truth, and forgiveness, how your brain processes abstract thought. Now, gender is a construct, which means it's an abstract thought. Biological sex, your genitals, your sex characteristics, all that stuff. That's concrete. Well, it's not concrete. I mean, if you have implants. No, I'm kidding. We have fun here. Anyway. So researchers at Carnegie Mellon University have leveraged machine learning to interpret human brain scans, allowing the team to uncover the regions of the brain behind how abstract concepts like justice, ethics, and consciousness form. The results of the study are available online. Humans have the unique ability to construct abstract concepts that have no anchor in the physical world, yet we often take this ability for granted. In this study, we have shown that newly identified components of meaning used by the human brain that acts like an indexing system, similar to a library's card catalog, to compose the meaning of abstract concepts. The ability of humans to think abstractly plays a central role in scientific and intellectual progress. Unlike concrete concepts, like hammer, abstract concepts, like ethics, have no obvious home in the parts of the brain that deal with perception or control of our bodies. Most of our understanding of how the brain processes objects and concepts is based on how our five senses take in information. It becomes difficult to describe the neural environment of abstract thoughts because many of the brain's mental tools to process them are themselves abstract. So tools build tools. It's like how, a hammer has like the hard part and then the wood part. And so like separately, you could use both as a tool and then you build them together and you're like, new tool. And that's how abstract thoughts like build off of each other. In this study, the team scanned the brains of 9 participants using a functional MRI. The team shifted through the data using machine learning. Yes, okay, so just said these abstract concepts are constructed by 3 dimensions of meaning in the brain. The first dimension corresponds to regions associated with language. For example, the concept of ethics might be linked to other words like rules and morals. A person must first understand the words to construct the additional meaning of ethics. The second dimension defines abstract concepts in terms of reference, whether to self or an external source. So orientation, okay. For example, spirituality refers to self, while causality is external to the self. The final dimension is rooted in social constructs. There is an inherent social component to the components of pride and gossip. Yes, pride is a social emotion, and gossip, you cannot gossip with yourself. I guess that would just be self-talk, but you can't spread rumors. You can spread rumors within yourself. I guess that would be called compounding. It's like paranoia. Basically, when your brain whispers rumors to itself that compound in severity that are not, it's kind of a game of telephone with your thoughts. It's rumination, and now you're like, what was the original, term I said to myself? I am worthy of love, and somehow I'm laying on the couch and I haven't moved for like 3 days. That's how rumors start in your brain. Anyway, yeah, so let me go over this again. Okay, words, right? You need the label is the first part. And then you also must understand the orientation. Where is this thing? Is it inside of me? Is it external? Where is it in relation to me? And the third thing is the social dimension, the social context of it all, right? And now that includes all elements of culture, right? So that could be, customs, attitudes, beliefs, literal physical places, landmarks, people, language, all this stuff, like the use of the language. Like, just touch the mic. What often bothers me about how math is taught in like K through 12. And the thing is math is a language. And a lot of times when you teach math in schools, you teach pure math. I know that but most of the examples are applied math, right? And so a lot of people, like when they take a math class or they get to the test portion, right? And the test portion is applied math, right? Pure math would be like teaching formal English, and applied math would be like teaching English for like slang, right? And so the thing is you can plug in formal English into slang. However, a lot of people, when they ask, where am I going to use this math, right? They're not being a sassy butthole. They are trying to ask in what social context. So if you were to think about it similarly to a language, right? They're trying to ask, where would I use this slang? who am I addressing, right? Because they are trying to retranslate into formal English. Because there are some slang terms you, for example, can't say to like people who are authority figures. So they're saying, where would I use this, the applied version, if I were to plug it back into formal language? Do you know what I mean? That's what they're trying to say. Usually when someone asks a question, or multiple people across, different cities or states, or because the thing is whenever I was in high school, 2009 to 2012. Very, okay. But I remember us asking, where are we going to use this? And then I see a lot of people online make jokes, new generations, different states. Where are we going to use this? It's not that the kids are dumb. It's when people ask across, a whole culture, especially since they're all in the same age bracket, that would, a demographic, like a cultural demographic, that likely means there's a translation error. Because, a lot of teachers do give the actual real, like, oh, I understand what you're saying. And, a lot of statistics, right? And the more applied math is like usually where people get it. Physics teachers or like more sciencey math classes really, really help like with translation, since it's like, math is only like half of it. So you're kind of like, it's kind of more conversational. Teaching pure math and then just doing applied exercises or applied tests is like, it's very hard to back translate. You know what I mean? So yeah. Okay, and math is abstract. So I'm bringing it back around. Anywho, for me, the most exciting result of this study was that we were able to predict the neural activation patterns for individual abstract concepts across people. It is wild to think that my concept of probability and spirituality is neurally similar to the next person's, even if their experience of spirituality is different. Yes, and you learn mainly through experience, but you kind of like get the general concept of spirituality, which is interesting. That's what he's saying. Okay. During the scan, each concept was presented visually, and the participant was allowed to think about this idea for 3 seconds. The participants saw the set of words 6 times. The 28 concepts covered in the study spanned 7 categories: mathematics, subtraction, equality, probability, and multiplication; scientific, gravity, force, heat, and acceleration; social, gossip, intimidation, forgiveness, and compliment; emotion, happiness, sadness, anger, and pride; law, contract, ethics, crime, and exoneration; metaphysical, causality, consciousness, truth, and necessity; and religiosity, deity, spirituality, sacrilege, and faith. So the work is based on 9 adult brain scans. Okay, so the thing is it's 9 adults that they scanned. So it's a pretty small sample size, but it's by Carnegie Mellon. When have academic institutions ever led us astray? Anywho, it's flashy to call this work mind reading. For me, it is proof that we have identified some of the elements of the brain's indexing system: verbal representation, externality, internality, and the social dimension, that our brains use to code concepts that have no physical manifestation in the world. Yeah. And the thing is this is how emotions, which are abstract, can be different across the world, right? So the emotion word itself can be different. Sadness may not directly translate in a lot of languages, and so like also the thing is with individualistic emotions, which I don't like, but we have in largely colonized countries, right? However, in collectivist cultures, you can share or split emotions. And you're like, how is that possible? The thing is emotions are literally contagious, right? I've said this a million times. If I smile, a lot of you will smile back. If I laugh, right, you guys are going to laugh back. We are sharing this moment together. We have a similar goal. We want to bond. We want to laugh. We just want to relax together, right? And so if emotions are contagious, right, two people can share contagion, quote unquote, is a confined space. And in this interpretation, it would be shared cultural understanding, right? So a lot of collectivist cultures do have a similar, right, nationality, right? They're similar, I guess, ethnicity, all this stuff, cultural customs, right? Their baseline, they have the emotions are pretty contained in a lot of various ways, particularly with space, and space is relationship to nature, relationship, like landmarks, like I said. So
there's more of a space element to it. Now, with individualistic, we assume it's a give-take system, right? Where like, oh, I'm giving and now you're responding. You know, we kind of like just talk and respond. There's not a lot of share. And so in a collectivist emotions, you are sharing, quote unquote, contagion. And that's just, I'm only saying that because emotions are contagious and there's really no easy way to like understood word that else I could use. And you can see this. What's really cool, I was talking about this on this one will get a little bit derailed, but I will get to it. So okay, art and emotions are expression, right? They're both abstract. And so how you can see different emotions show up in different cultures is through the perspective that they use. In individualistic cultures, in our art, we largely use linear perspective. Linear perspective is it's one-dimensional, right? It's mainly the distance between points, right? And so like if you're thinking about, you're trying to communicate how far or how close things are within a picture, but it's still flat. With collectivist emotions, a lot of cultures use planar perspective. Now, how you communicate planar perspective is you do foreground, middle ground, background. So it's overlapping planes, okay? So it's kind of, and the thing is what is so cool about this is if you read Attention Beyond Mindfulness and all the other books I've ever recommended, okay, in Western cultures, right, we mainly experience reality through perception, okay? This is what they even said. Each concept was presented visually, okay? So we see, right? Now, in Eastern cultures, a lot of them that use collectivist emotions experience reality through breath, right? So my biggest grievance with Western psychology philosophy is the separation of mind and body. That was the biggest mistake that we could have ever made. Now, the thing is when it comes to individualistic cultures using linear perspective, right? One dimension, okay? Now, when it comes to collectivist cultures using planar perspective, and they use planes, overlapping planes are two-dimensional, okay? So when you bring head and body together, 1 and 2D, you get life, which is 3D. Now, if you want to talk about the physics translation of this and the actual movement through time, right? A 4D continuum, let's just say E equals MC squared. I'm so serious. It's like so fun. I've outlined this before. I'll do a whole episode on it. Anyway, it's all relative. Who knew? Okay, so yeah. So when it comes to collectivist emotions, right, like I was talking about, in a lot of Eastern cultures, they value acceptance, right? Calm, stillness. Okay. And so acceptance is not just like it's like just accepting reality as it is, okay? Now, acceptance is your only still emotion across individualistic and collectivist emotions. It's the only, quote, still one, okay? How emotions are made. No, Between Us, How Cultures Create Emotions by Bacha Mosquita. Now, if Eastern cultures are defining reality by overlapping planes, that means that life is constant motion, okay? So it would make complete and total sense for people who experience reality as constantly moving to value the only still emotion, okay? Because the thing is the difference between sight and breath is that I can close my eyes, I can take a nap, I can turn my head away, I cannot stop breathing, right? So it would make sense artistically, emotionally, that collectivist cultures would value calmness, stillness, right? It's really cool. Abstract thought. So fun. Anywho, yeah, they were talking about the label. Is it internal, external, and then the relationship to social cons? It's a 3D. It's 3D. And then if you factor in, the thing is anxiety and a lot of people, well, depending on how you interpret time. Okay, but no. Where it goes into like E equals MC squared and 4D continuum is that we're constantly moving forward, right? Or falling forward. My physics people will know where I'm going with this. Isn't that fun? E does equal MC squared. Special General relativity, we have fun here. Anywho, now that is faith, truth, and forgiveness. That will be relevant later on. Okay. Now, abstract thought. You're like, this was a gender conversation. Gender is abstract. And what is cool is that, like, I mean, across cultures, there's a lot of different types of gender. You know, like you could have like girl, boy, like agender, what was that? Non-binary, you know, you could have all different variations of gender. You know, you could have two-spirit, and that's another type of culture, right? And then, you know, internal, external. You could, if they're both, then that makes it more complex. And then also it's relevant to, you know, social area. Gender is indexed and it's built upon by other abstract concepts. Let's keep it moving. This will get into the more neuroscience of it. You're like, perfect. We needed a break from something complex. What? I have to subscribe. I am not subscribing. Okay. Meet the neuroscientist shattering the myth of the gendered brain. Now, the thing is there are different, like, I guess, sex characteristics with like chromosomes and hormone fluctuation and like what hormones are present within the brain. So there are like sex things that can affect your brain. Yeah. However, gender is something different. Like I described, it is made up. So let's see the neural effects of this made up thing. Now, what I want to tell you ahead of time is, I've told you before, the brain literally maps, okay? So, and also there's different types of awareness. And so how it maps is like, you know, your nervous system is connected to in your body to musculature, right? And so like if society has maybe taught you that you're supposed to restrict your movement, you're not supposed to take up space, not supposed to take up space in a physical, like verbal, you should not be seen or heard space, right? You will shrink yourself down. You will suppress yourself. And that will be seen in the roots and the maps you take in your brain, okay? And if you're also allowed, socialized, to have more freedom of movement, you know, you can make bigger gestures, you can spread on the subway, then your brain will probably do more a direct route. So let's see how socialization incorporated, or, you know, some people are going the long way around and some people are going like direct route. And so we're going to talk about how gender and socialization and nature affects your brain. Okay, so this is an article by cognitive neuroscientist Gina Rippon. She wrote The Gendered Brain. This woman has a PhD in physiological psychology and a focus on brain processes and schizophrenia. Okay? So when she is not in the lab using state-of-the-art brain imaging techniques to study developmental disorders such as autism, we have a pruning issue, okay? She is out in the world debunking the different sex differences myth. The idea that you can sex a brain, or that there is such thing as a male brain and a female brain. So basically, when Republicans are like, when they dig up your body, actually your bones, who cares? Your brain will be pretty much disintegrated. They will not be able to. Okay, you know what? It is a scientific argument that has gathered momentum unchallenged since the 18th century. When people were happy to spout off about what men and women's brains were like before you could even look at them, they came up with these nice ideas and metaphors that fitted the status quo in society and gave rise to different education for men and women. Rippon has analyzed the data on sex differences in the brain. She admits that she, like many others, initially sought out these differences, but she couldn't find any beyond the negligible, and other research was also starting to question the very existence of such differences. For example, once any difference in brain size were accounted for, well-known sex differences in key structures disappeared, which is when the penny dropped. Perhaps it was time to abandon the age-old search for the differences between brains from men and brains from women. Are there any significant differences based on sex alone? The answer, she says, is no. To suggest otherwise is neuro-foolishness. That's what we do here. This is neuro-foolishness. We have jester privilege. Actually, no, that's where we advise kings. Well, you know what? You guys could be in positions of power. You hold the power over your own lives. And I have jester's privilege. I am your neuro-jester. where I am like, did you know that if you decenter gender, you free yourself of constraints? And then you're like, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So the idea of the male brain and the female brain suggests that each is a characteristically homogeneous thing, and that whoever has got a male brain, say, will have the same kind of aptitudes, preferences, and personalities as everyone else with that type of brain. We now know that that's not the case. We're at the point where we need to say, forget the male and female brain. It's a distraction. It's inaccurate. It's possibly harmful too, because it's used as a hook to say, well, there's no point of girls doing science because they haven't got a science brain, or boys shouldn't be emotional or should want to lead. The next question was, what then is driving the differences in behavior between girls and boys, men and women? Our gendered world, she says, shapes everything from educational policy and social hierarchies to relationships, self-identity, well-being, and mental health. If that sounds like a familiar 20th century social conditioning argument, it is, except that it is now coupled with knowledge of the brain's plasticity, which we have only been aware of in the past 30 years. Yes. Okay. So the thing is like I said, gender, right, is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, you're given the prophecy, right? Anyone, you're raised Christian, and you're like, all right, so if you don't, abide by these rules, you're going to burn in hell. And so now you're really, really watching every single behavior, every single thought that you had, right? You're like, oh, I don't want to deviate from this because I don't want to burn in hell. And I remember, like, sometimes I would pray growing up, and I would be like, God, please forgive me, for I have sinned. I know you're not real. I didn't say that in my brain. I swear I didn't say that in my brain, And so now you're like fighting yourself. And the thing is you can also start fighting your body. And you do get into dysmorphia aspects there as well. Okay. It is now a scientific given, says Rippon, that the brain is molded from birth onwards and continues to be molded through to the cognitive cliff in old age, where our gray cells start disappearing. Sorry. We're leading everyone to a cognitive cliff. I know that that's not funny. I'm going to tell you guys some trauma stuff in the midst of my ramblings. My parents, there's this like glass overlook at the Grand Canyon. And it was being built like a while back, like I think like 15 years ago. And my mom would always say, Sarah, I know you hate us. I know when we get older, you're going to take us to that glass overlook at the Grand Canyon, and you're going to leave us there and you're never going to come back. And I was like, yeah, I will. Sorry, that's not the cognitive cliff. And there is, safety and security. And I would never be. The thing is my brother's a physical therapist, and he lives closer. So if he were to take care of my parents, he would take care of my parents in their older age. Okay. Yeah, cognitive cliff. So out goes the old biology is destiny argument. Effectively, that you get the brain you are born with. Yes, it gets a bit bigger and better connected when you've got your developmental endpoint, determined by a biological blueprint unfolding along the way. With brain plasticity, the brain is much more a function of experiences. If you learn a skill, your brain will change. It will carry on changing. This is shown to be the case in studies of black cab drivers learning the knowledge, for example. The brain is waxing and waning much more than we ever realized. So if you haven't had particular experiences, if as a girl you weren't given Lego, you don't have the same spatial training that other people in the world have. Yeah. I don't know if I'm a girl. The thing is now that I've read all this and I understand this, the thing is I've understood this for a year now. Gender is untethered in my brain. Gender, it makes no sense. This is what gender is in my brain. When you're like so many tangents, it's because I'm now realizing I could do another episode for this. I feel like for me, gender is like, when you get invited to a birthday party and you're given like cake and balloon duty, and you got the cake in the cart, right? And you're like going through the parking lot with that rickety little, cart. And you're like holding the balloons and you're like, no one at the store gave me a weight to tie these down. I know that if I release these balloons logically, like it's not gonna be good. And so like while you're opening up the back car door, you put the cake in, all the balloons fly away. And you're like, oh, that's how gender is for me. The balloons still exist, yes, but not here, and I am not that good of a friend. I tried to perform my role of setting up the party, but then I'm not going to go back in the store and get more balloons. You know what I mean? You're going to get a cake. I'm going to sing as loud as I can. And hopefully my role will be satisfied. I'm sorry. I can't go back in that store. That's how I feel about my gender. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So if on the other hand, you were given those spatial tasks again and again, you would get better at them. The neural pathways change. They become automatic pathways. The task really does become easier. So practice doesn't make perfect. Practice kind of makes, makes you understand. No, practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent, I guess. Or semi-permanent, like hair dye. You just got to keep reapplying, but it will stay for a lot longer than just, spray paint in your hair. Neuroplasticity throws the nature-nurture polarity out the window. Nature is entangled with nature. Is that a typo? Nature is entangled with nature? Says Rippon, added to this, being part of a social cooperative group is one of the prime drives of our brain. The brain is also predictive and forward-thinking in a way we had never previously realized. Your brain is forward-thinking? What did I say about falling and moving forward? 4D continuum. We are forward-thinking. That does not mean that we can only go forward. I love space. Like a sat-nav, it follows rules. It's hungry for them. The brain is a rule scavenger, explains Rippon, and it picks up its rules from the outside world. The rules will change how the brain works and how someone behaves. The upshot of gendered rules, the gender gap becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I wrote, initially, this sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then I got an article that said about faith, and then I was like, faith? Prophecy, right? Predestination, predetermined, religious. Is God real? Physics is. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So, I don't want to crap on a bunch of people right now. God could be however you define it. Okay. So Rippon regularly talks in schools. She wants girls to have leading scientists as role models, and she wants all children to know that their identities, abilities, achievements, and behaviors are not prescribed by their biological sex. Gender bombardment makes us think otherwise. Male babies dressed in blue romper suits, female ones in pink, is a binary coding that belies a status quo that resists the scientific evidence. Pinkification, says Rippon, as Rippon calls it, has to go. Parents don't always like what they hear. They say, I have a son and a daughter, and they are different. And I have 2 daughters, and they are very different. When you talk about male and female identity, people are very wedded, another construct. Queer ultimatum much? Okay, sorry. To the idea that men and women are different. People like me are not sex difference deniers, continues Rippon. Of course, there are sex differences. Anatomically, men and women are different. The brain is a biological organ. Sex is a biological factor, but it is not the sole factor. It intersects with so many variables. I ask her for a comparable watershed moment in the history of scientific understanding in order to gauge the significance of her own. The idea of the earth circling around the sun. I'm sorry. Do you know what keeps the earth circling around the sun? Gravity. Gravity does. Now, oh God. This goes back to, I can't. You know how more than one planet can circle the sun? They share the gravitational pull of the sun. They share contagion due to the space that they are confined to. The space-time they are confined to. Everything is physics. We're literally just planets orbiting each other, colliding, going supernova. Some of us are actually black holes. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. What was I saying? Letting go of age-old certainties is frightening, concedes Rippon, who is both optimistic about the future and fearful for it. I am concerned about what the 21st century is doing, the way it's making gender more relevant. We need to look at what we're plugging into our children's brains. Yeah, the thing is I actually do have I'm scared I might actually have to get to that in the second point. So the thing is yeah, your brain does develop, and gender, and is kind of getting more pronounced. We're noticing it everywhere, and people are emphasizing it more, and then people are refusing to learn pronouns, which is just like pronouns. You should have learned that already. So now that you're tying it, they're just trying to. They originally had no issue with it. They're tying it to a group that they don't like, and so now they do have issue with it, and now they're like kind of devolving because they had previously established meaning, and now they've actually altered their understanding of something that did to once logically make sense. Okay, it's a type of skill regression. And then if you look at it over generations, right? We are devolving. Well, the oppressors are. Epigenetics doesn't just affect people who are oppressed. This is not saying that you should feel bad for oppressors. I'm saying that we're all bumping into each other. We're all interacting, right? Some may suppress, but the thing is people who are oppressing, right? They also are being affected by that. And I will get into that maybe in the second one. But yeah. Ours may be the age of the self-image, yet we aren't ready to let the individual self emerge, unfettered by cultural expectations of one's biological sex. That disconnect, says Rippon, is writ large, for example, in men. It suggests that there is something wrong in their self-image. The social brain wants to fit in. The sat-nav recalibrates, according to expectations. If they are being driven down a route that leads to self-harm or even suicide or violence, what is taking them there? On the plus side, our plastic brains are good learners. All we need to do is change the life lessons. How gender stereotypes led brain science. Several things went wrong in the early days of sex differences in brain imaging research. With respect to sex differences, there was a frustrating backwards focus on historical beliefs and stereotypes, termed neurosexism by psychologist Cordelia Fine. Studies were designed based on the go-to list of the robust differences between females and males generated over the centuries, or the data were interpreted in terms of stereotypical female-male characteristics, which may not have been even measured in the scanner. If a difference was found, it was much more likely to be published than a finding of no difference, and it would also breathlessly be hailed as an, at last, the truth moment, by an enthusiastic media. Finally, the evidence that women are hardwired to be rubbish at map reading and that men can't multitask. So the advent of brain imaging at the end of the 20th century did not do much to advance our understanding of alleged links between sex and the brain. Here in the 21st century, are we doing any better? One major breakthrough in recent years has been the realization that even in adulthood, our brains are continuously being changed. Not just by the education we receive, but also by the jobs we do, the hobbies we have, the sports we play. I was going to make a... Okay. Sorry. Your brain can get changed by a lot of things. The brain of a working London taxi driver will be different from that of a trainee and from that of a retired taxi driver. We can track differences among people who play video games or are learning origami or play the violin. Supposing these brain-changing experiences are different for different people or groups of people. If, for example, being male means that you have much greater experience of constructing things or manipulating complex 3D representations, such as playing with Lego, it is very likely that that this will be shown in your brain. Brains reflect the lives that they have lived, not just the sex of their owners. Isn't that great? But I mean, hey, if the owner has a lot of sex, then that will be lived experience mapped on your brain. Hey, okay. No, if I don't. The 20s were rough. Okay, seeing the lifelong impressions made on our plastic brains by the experiences and attitudes they encounter makes us realize that we need to take a really close look at what is going on outside of our heads, as well as inside. We can no longer cast the sex differences debate as nature versus nurture. We need to acknowledge that the relationship between a brain and this world is not a one-way street, but a constant two-way flow of traffic. That it is, right? The nervous system is bidirectional, right? Okay? That means that this afferent, it can go up or down, right? So separating mind from body, you're like, what? You don't really have to, if you separated the mind from the body, then you don't really have to worry about the brain will map, but like, hey, so there's a bunch of stuff coming in from the body, and the body has touch sensors, and so that's interacting with the environment. It's damn near impossible to like achieve total sensory deprivation continuously. You could go in a sensory deprivation tank or, solitary confinement, but that leads to a life of mental distress that is unparalleled. It's actually it's horrible. It's horrifying. It's actually a form of torture since we're social creatures. Okay. Once we acknowledge that our brains are plastic and moldable, then the power of gender stereotypes becomes evident. If we could follow the brain journey of a baby girl or a baby boy, we could see that right from the moment of birth, or even then, these brains may be set on different roads. Toys, clothes, books, parents, families, teachers, schools, universities, employers, social and cultural norms, and of course, gender stereotypes, all can signpost different directions from different brains. Yeah, so that is, the thing is gender is, I guess at this point, since it's so baked into the fabric of our lives, what is that? The fabric of our lives. What is that? Do you know what
Is that like a commercial for like Downy or something like that?
Maybe, yeah. Oh, it's baked into the fabric of our lives. Now, how would you describe space-time? Would you say it's like a plane is like in a certain Okay, it's... Sarah, shut up. Anyway, yeah.
Also, it's actually Fabric of Our Lives is the slogan for Cotton, which I think is like the underwear brand.
Oh, cotton. Breathable fabric. Isn't that great? We are breathable people. So yeah, we need to take into account air. Anyway, with input from exciting breakthroughs in neuroscience, the neat binary distinctiveness of these labels is being challenged. We are coming to realize that nature is inextricably entangled with nurture. What used to be thought fixed and inevitable is shown to be plastic and flexible. The powerful biology-changing effects of our physical and our social worlds are being revealed. Yeah, fixed and inevitable. That is, you talk about predestination, you talk about social prescription, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? History is doomed to repeat itself, so stop repeating history. That's the thing, is like doom is dread, right? And it's focus on the future. And so the future is uncertain. It's also at a distance. And if you focus on the end result, like I've said this a million times, similar to gambling, you're going to start to get more and more irrational the more you play. So yeah, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're focused on the end of your life, and that is the only point you're focused on, your journey is just going to be you like beelining for that, right? And the thing is a lot of if you guys have ever driven through a city, a lot of times you can't just drive straight through something. In the similar way, you can't just drive straight through your life. And so a lot of people, when they focus on the end, they're going straight through. And now they're cutting through people's yards. They're cutting through relationships. They're cutting through jobs. You know what I mean? And so like it makes sense, I guess, if you're forward thinking, your eyes are locked dead ahead. However, when it comes to every single factor that's happening, and you got to be able to change. You got to be able to turn. You got to be able to pivot. You got to be able to grow. You got to be able to scale. You got to scale down, right? If you're walking a straight line towards the end, then what happens at the end? You hit that cognitive cliff and it's a straight drop, okay? So you got to be able to maneuver, scale, move, not restrict, and don't focus on the end, okay? Now I'm going to keep going. There is another article that I'm going to read you guys, and oh my God, I'm sad. Now I want to do this all the way through. I don't know. Okay. So there are sex versus gender associations with brain structure. Now this is the Journal of Clinical Neuroscience. All right, I'm going to just read the highlights right now. Sex versus gender associations with brain structure were examined in adults. Gender was assessed using the BEM-sex role inventory. Sex, but not gender, was associated with proportion-adjusted brain volumes. Gender, but not sex, was associated with prefrontal cortical thickness. Association between gender and prefrontal cortical thickness were sex-specific. Now, prefrontal cortical thickness. Now, I will do a part 2 on this, but let me give a little spoiler. What most likely, and every person who's like a neuroscientist, what is most likely or could be the cause of this thickening is trauma, peer-related trauma, okay? Peer-related trauma is the thickening of this prefrontal, cortex, all this stuff, could be connected to peer-related trauma in girls specifically, or people, and there's another article that I will link to back up this additional claim, who are gender nonconforming. Now, what is peer-related trauma that I'm talking about right now? Socialization, confinement, right? Now, what also happens in your prefrontal, medial cortex is empathy, right? Anyway, it's interesting that there's no thickening of the prefrontal cortex for dudes. And that's interesting. That's where empathy takes place. Anyway, we found that female sex, independent of continuum scores, was associated with larger proportion adjusted volumes for the basal ganglia, hippocampus, and ventral diencephalon. Okay, female sex and higher continuum scores were independently associated with larger corpus callosum volumes. Now, your corpus callosum communicates between left and right brain. It's that little structure that kind of keeps them together, and it's information highway. It facilitates information exchange. Okay, post hoc testing showed sex-specific associations between higher femininity scores and thicker prefrontal cortical thickness for the ROIs in females, but not in males. In conclusion, sex and gender showed semi-independent associations with brain structure in general population sample. Our research supports that the disaggregation of sex and gender to provide a more nuanced perspective on brain structural differences between men and women. Yeah. Oh, this is making me so sad because now the point I want to make is actually way too long. And if I stop right now, then I won't be able to. Okay. So I'm going to try to wrap this up. I did want to get into the cognitive difference between men and women. Now, the point that I will get to in the next episode is that your brain literally maps, okay? Mind mapping, I've recommended that book before. So there are different mapping techniques and different styles of mapping. The thing is it's navigation, right? There's different ways to navigate through the world. There's different ways to navigate through issues in your life, right? Like I said, if you're socialized to, you're not allowed movement, literally, how you can't express yourself. No one listens to you. You're kind of tighter. You're always kind of sitting, sucking in your stomach, right? There's always things that you got to keep in check. And then men also too, people who socialize as men, you do have constraints on you as well. They're more emotional constraints. You can't cry. You can't hug your bros without it being gay, which is, basically it's going to be femininity. So it's, you don't want to be defined as girl. So yeah, you have constraints on you. Granted, you did kind of put the constraints on yourself. I was talking about this on my Instagram story. The last people I feel like who are going to escape the panopticon are men locked in the tower. Because the thing is, you know what? I'll get to it. Anyway, two minds, the cognitive differences between men and women. So I wanted to find and explore neural circuits that regulate specific behaviors, says Shaw, then a newly minted Caltech PhD who is beginning a postdoctoral fellowship at Columbia. So he zeroed in on sex-associated differences, behavioral differences as mating, parenting, and aggression. These behaviors are essential for survival and propagation, says Shaw, MD, PhD, now a Stanford professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences and of neurobiology. They're innate rather than learned, at least in animals, so the circuitry involved ought to be developmentally hardwired in the brain. These circuits should differ depending on which sex you're looking at. His plan was to learn what he could about the activity of genes tied to behaviors that differ between the sexes, then use the knowledge to help identify the neuronal circuits, clusters of nerve cells, in close communication with one another underlying those behaviors. At the time, this was not a universally popular idea. The neuroscience community had largely considered any observed sex-associated differences in cognition behavior in humans to be due to the effects of cultural influences. Animal researchers, for their part, seldom even bothered to use female rodents in their experiments, figuring that the cyclical variations in their reproductive hormones would introduce confounding variability into the search for fundamental neurological insights. Oh, sorry, it's going to be confusing that this animal has a menstrual cycle. What other animals have menstrual cycles that are worthy of study? Anyway, I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to leave a little note for that. But yeah, so this is just going to be a little sidebar for our shower thoughts. Anyway, decenter gender. The whole point will come to will come together in the next episode. But we are slowing down because I have too much of a autistic rant building up inside of me. So they're innate rather than learned. Also, as you'll notice in the previous article, they said, the main 5 senses. Well, I guess, sight, sound, taste, well, I guess hearing instead. What touch, and then smell. So the thing is a lot of people say that intuition may be a sixth sense. Now, the difference between intuition and something that is instinct is that instinct is innate and intuition is kind of learned. And the thing is I have a separate episode on this completely outlined. I think intuition is it's really only described as women's intuition. The thing is oh God. It's more of fear, right? It incorporates fear, disgust, empathy, and there's a whole bunch of like mechanisms involved. And what's interesting is that to develop intuition, you cannot have appetitive emotions present, like bloodlust or sexual craving or all this stuff. And so a lot of times, if you cannot develop or intuition is not present if you have appetitive emotions. So it's usually described as women's intuition, right? And you've heard a lot of times men describe women as a piece of meat, right? Okay. So I have a full episode outlined. I think that intuition is an emotion that women developed, and it's interesting. Emotions evolved with human beings. And so for it to only evolve in one of the sexes or one of the types of human beings that are migrating together, that means that you need to look at the relationship dynamic between the sexes of this, shared species. And so I think it's really interesting because I think that it gets into kind of cannibalism. Now you're like, wait, what? Okay. Cannibalism is interspecies, right? And so like looking at women, like there's something to be consumed, like appetitive emotions are activated, which means that intuition cannot be developed or formed, right? And so there's so many moving parts for like intuition. It's a gut feeling, okay? Now, a gut feeling, like I said, is linked to disgust. However, it's also like it involves fear, which is like eyes, right? Okay? So the thing is however, there is an empathy element to intuition. So what could be happening is that women are usually going to empathize with men because they register them as men. However, they see there's a weird, most fear is communicated through eyes, like predator, prey, like sort of like sight locked on. When it's between humans, it's mostly through the eyes or, verbal speech. So there is something that's activating a deep visceral fear, like a disgust, right? However, disgust and empathy are both, most morals are rooted in disgust and empathy. So they're now activated at the same time. So they're playing off of each other. So they're entering this weird judgment zone, okay? Like if you're activating both empathy and disgust, that means that you're forward propelling and you're repelling judgment calls are now in conflict with each other based off something you saw, okay? Now, empathy can only happen between two people who see each other as human beings. So, I think intuition, and I have a full outline, is an emotion that women have developed in response to men treating them historically throughout, since, settling down and like no longer hunter-gatherer. Well, actually, no, that is hunter-gatherer. I think it's an emotion that we developed in order to, realize that men can be creepy. Okay, I have a full episode outlined on that. Is that fun? Does that sound fun?
So fun.
Okay. The thing is intuition is learned. And yeah, instinct is, something that so women have instinct. However, we're mainly described as having intuition. And it's just cool. And there's so many different cultural variables. Anywho, that's not to say that, well, gender is still made up. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not to say that gender is not important. It's a really great, imprecise navigational tool to kind of get you out of situations in a pinch or get you into situations. You know what I mean? However, I will get into that into the next episode. But yeah, this has been Decentering Gender. Now you're like, this was a whole lot of buildup, and there is a lot of buildup, and I will release in the next episode. But if there are any questions, if there's anything you'd like to ask me, if you're like, Sarah, that was an interesting thought and you really cut yourself off, please comment it below. Every single resource will be linked. Please check it out. It is so fun. You don't have to, when you decenter gender, again, you don't got to abstain. It could be a tool that you have in your toolbox, right? However, it's not the only tool in your toolbox. If you want to, it's a poor craftsman who blames his tools. And also, if you only got one tool over a lifetime of being a craftsman, like, come on, accumulate more tools to express yourself, right? If you only have a Phillips head screwdriver, yes, that is a pretty universally recognized tool. However, if you want to, carve. I mean, you could carve. You'd really blunt your screwdriver. Sorry, we're being lesbian about this right now. But, you have different tools, different ways to express yourself so your life can emerge. So it is useful in some respects, and it can be necessary in, like, a clinical maybe, or, like, literally passing a country checkpoint. You will need that, like a passport. But again, borders are also constructs. So it's kind of like you need a construct for a construct, because we're all abiding by constructs now. Like, everything is built off of each other. Everything is linked, tools upon tools upon tools. So yeah, it's a tool that you could use, but you shouldn't be defined by. You shouldn't constrain yourself to just a Phillips head screwdriver. That would be, I mean, what if we got to paint something? Anyway. Yeah, that has been this episode of Schauer Thoughts. I hope that it was here. This episode was putting a lot of product on, and we're going to soak in it for a week. We're going to do some hair oiling. We're going to do a deep mask. We're going to do a foot mask. And when we come back, we're going to have shiny hair. The skin on our feet is going to be peeling off, and we're going to be ready to go to navigate through the last component of decentering gender. Okay. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure to rate me 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is truly one of the joys of my life. You guys are awesome and cool and amazing. And I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.